And I think once again, it calls attention to the need to protect our history as Nigerians, as it is slowly fading away. Thank you.
Antonia? Hello, Antonia?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please, if you don't mind, will you be able to recast what you've said? Just briefly within 5 minutes so that we can hear you. Because I was network interruption here. So we're unable to hear you clearly. For over a period of time that I'm representing, we cannot hear you.
You said?
Just briefly recast. Will you be able to say what you presented? Just tell us briefly, sum it up so that we can hear you.
All right. So can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
All right. Basically, my study is on Afro-Brazilian architecture in Nigeria. And I divided it into 3 sub-themes. The first is their historical and cultural value. In this area, I talk about how it stands as a representation of mixed cultures. That's the influence of Portuguese cultures on Afro-Brazilians. That's former slaves that returned to Lagos, known as Agudas. I also said it's a mark of identity because these slaves were neither foreigners nor locals. So they were hybrid, if you permit me to use that word. And it was portrayed in their architectural styles. It also stood as a statement. It also stood as a statement of the existence of creativity outside British style of building, which was what was dominating Nigeria in the colonial era. It marked a new dawn for architectural designs because we had elites and educated individuals who were not necessarily part of the royal family being able to have buildings that were higher than those of the chiefs and the kings. Now, this could only happen during the colonial era, so it marked a new dawn and the creation of a new social class because the existence or the use of an Afro-Brazilian structure was seen as a sign of wealth. Now, concerning their influence on society, I said, that's for their influence on society, being able to have higher houses than the chiefs, and a mark of the struggle between the elites and the colonial masters. Now, for their demolition, I argue on the importance or the significance of the demolition of these Afro-Brazilian houses. I argue that it is not just the clearing of space for new rising, but rather the loss of cultures and stories, because buildings embody historical stories and elements that are forever lost when they are demolished. It is a mark of a new era, an era where we don't care about our history or the preservation of our history, and the choice of capitalism and its gains over our historical identities. It is not just the loss of properties to these families, but rather a loss of heritage. So for me, it is a statement of what history means to Nigerians, like the dilapidation of any other historical related buildings, such as our archives or the slave wells. So I'm basically arguing that as Nigerians, we have a lot to do when it comes to protecting our identity and history. And one way we can do that is by protecting our buildings, significant buildings like the Afro-Brazilian architectural structures. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Antonia. All right, we've listened to you briefly on what you presented. We want to ask you a few questions. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. All right.
Can I suggest that we maybe
because of network, if you go
The network is back now. The network is back now.
All right. Antonia,
Yes,
hello.
sir.
Give up
I
more
can
time.
hear you.
After other presenters will have been done, then we'll get back to you.
All right.
All right. Okay. Just stay connected. Okay. All right. Please prepare a question for Antonia. I have mine. Yeah. Well, because of time, do we have comfort as we go there? Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you. Let's read the minutes. Let us.
Thank you all for being here. So, yes. So what I'm presenting today is an excerpt from a much longer and more robust work. So pardon me if it feels a bit excerpt-ish. There's also a typo in the title. The title should be a Lagos diptych on looking charismatic speciality, not unlocking. So this paper examines the value of popular fiction in disengaging charismatic speciality. I'm not going to go too deeply into that concept and the way that I use charisma in my work, just so that I can make use of the time that we do have for today.
So your title
It's on the program. It just should be on looking, not unlocking. So I will offer a short reading of Superinquency's Iska and Chinua Achebe's No Longer at Ease that demonstrates how a particular mode of reading African literature from the viewpoint of the global and cosmopolitan plays a major role in determining how textual depictions of urbanity are either valued or sidelined. So in reading Quincy's novel against a high literary depiction of the city, so Quincy's novel here is standing in for the sort of more popular fiction example. Reading Ernesto Achebe, we can see a clear example of what can be lost when stories depicting African urban spaces mainly privilege a globalist or cosmopolitan ethos while demoting the local to largely to insignificance. So I'll demonstrate that Quincy's Lagos is a local space located in a network with other built landscapes across the nation. And this kind of scaled down interpretation of Lagos's urbanity represents some of the possible alternatives that can come to the fore when we engage with more democratic forms of representational media. So across the two texts and the short time I have today, I'm going to just point at a couple of examples from the novels to make my argument here. I hope to demonstrate how the scale of the global necessitates narrativizations with a cosmopolitan ethos so that a city like Lagos emerges as a synecdoche for the nation state of Nigeria. This scale of reading, however, can often obscure the character of the city when it's imagined within a smaller spatial network as one more distinct space among many cities and towns. More broadly, I'm interested in more of my work, interested in how the field of African literature and African literary criticism is shaped according to a barometer of spectacle and charisma, and how this institutional backdrop constructs and reinforces a spectrum of African landscapes, spaces, and stories that favors only the most exceptional. So very briefly, I use the term charisma as a framework to call out a problem of attention in my work. It's a problem that's created in the implicit global and often neo-imperialist gaze that not only determines visibility and hypervisibility, but part of my argument is that it can foreclose the cultural and intellectual value perceived in landscapes and stories through a more horizontal engagement. So essentially, the narrative rhetoric of exceptionality that is overlaid onto a globally hyper-visible and cosmopolitan space like Lagos, for instance, does not account for the full range of locally relevant stories as being told in and about the city and about other places in the country and on the continent more broadly. So Chinua Achebe is no longer at ease. To dive into that, the main character protagonist, Obi Okonkwo, returns to Nigeria after his studies in England. As he's living and working in a nation on the cusp of independence, he finds himself inadequately prepared to deal with the new realities of the nation's social and political condition. Superinquency's Iska, and Iska is a Hausa word that roughly translates to wind, follows a young woman, the protagonist Philia Inu, from her last days as a secondary school student in Kaduna, and it traces her movements across the country while highlighting and exploring the relationships and desires that populate her life and pull her from the northern cities of Kaduna and Jos to her eastern ancestral village Ogabu, and eventually to the bustling city of Lagos in the west. Both Iska and No Longer at Ease have a few similarities in plot, including a protagonist that moves to Lagos whose romantic relationships serve as a major defining feature of the novel's plot. The similarities across these novels allow me to pay attention to the textures of each novel's approach in elaborating on the concerns and mood of the new nation, Nigeria, and how that mood is encoded in space. So in No Longer at Ease, the main character often offers codes for us, for the reader, I should say, for understanding the larger implications and origins of people's beliefs and social behaviors. So through the depiction of Lagos as a space through which the people of the nation frame themselves as citizens of the world at large, the novel exposes the narrative processes of myth-making that are at work in this cosmopolitan framing. So for instance, we discover that Obi Okonkwo got his first and strongest impression of Lagos from a former World War II soldier who says to him as a child, quote, "There is no darkness there," speaking of Lagos, "because at night the electric shines like the sun and people are always walking about. That is, those who want to walk. If you don't want to walk, you only have to wave your hand and a pleasure car stops for you." The soldier then goes on unsolicited to say, quote, "If you see a white man, take off your hat for him. The only thing he cannot do is mold a human being," end quote. In narrating this retrospective anecdote at a point in the novel where we're still getting to know the main character, the novel reveals several things about itself. It's important to note that these myths about Lagos come from someone who is not only an elder in Obi Okonkwo's community, but also has been revered since his return from the white man's war. He's a veteran of the colonizers' war into which he was almost certainly conscripted involuntarily. The injustice of this reality is further heightened by the skewed myths he has internalized and is now disseminating to our main character about both the colonial metropolis of Lagos and the colonizers themselves. This anecdote in the novel does the work of revealing how a city like Lagos comes to be mythologized and takes on an imagined identity that is larger and sharper than its hazy and disorienting reality, tying the city's fantastical image where, electric shines like the sun and anyone can get a ride in a pleasure car if they so wish, to the myth of the white man's supposed godlike abilities. These two things alongside each other encodes the exceptionality and superiority of both the built city of Lagos and the white man who's apparently responsible for that creation. No Longer at Ease continues in a pattern akin to a kind of cultural brokering, so it seems to be translating Nigeria for its audience, in which the narrator explains Nigeria's social history in the face of colonization as encoded in the characters' interactions with the city space of Lagos. Within this pattern, there is a definite trend to not only recognize social histories, but also describe and translate them, attributing certain present realities to colonial history. The novel produces its explanations using everyday behaviors and beliefs that a Nigerian audience might take for granted. So it depicts the city as an exemplary space for understanding Nigeria as it's situated within a global empire. In Equency's novels, however, greater value is placed in enriching the plot, and there's much less emphasis on explaining and illuminating the social and political life of Nigeria. The central questions for the plot in Iska seems to be, is it riveting? Will this be engaging for the audience? As a result of these primary considerations, we get the indulgence of prevalent stereotypes and superstitions. His novel features a lot of unearned plot twists that seem to come out of nowhere, and it's a wild ride reading that thing. But whatever the perceived failings of Equency's writing, there's an evident habit of zeroing in on the characters and spaces for what they are within the context of the plot. If there's anything unique or distinct or exceptional about Lagos, for instance, it's that Lagos is vastly busy as contrasted with other built landscapes in Nigeria. There's very little attempt to understand the uniqueness of a place like Lagos in the context of its global position as a locus for the British imperial enterprise, or as a city which is simultaneously cosmopolitan and located in a developing country. So Equency writes about Lagos as one would write about any other city in Nigeria, in Africa, in the world. When Philia moves to Lagos unannounced, the narrator talks about coming to Lagos for the first time alone, unmet by anyone. And he says, all these factors are not likely to endear anyone to the city. And Philia found the city large, confusing, pretentious, busy, and impersonal. Her sister also says that the Lagos is growing too fast in every way. And at first you hate it, but there are people who cannot leave Lagos for one night, etc. The features of the city that excite and depress attract, and repel are presented simultaneously. And later in the text, reflecting on Philia's disillusionment with Lagos and with her life in general, the narrator elaborates that Lagos was a place as artificial as plastic dishes and as treacherous as the eroding hills of Milliken Hill. And it's a home of bastards and phony characters all searching for their own identity. It's a bit harsh sometimes, but there's a lot of love there still. It's important to note that Philia's first impression of the pretentious and impersonal city is not very far removed from the city of clowns, etc. Iska is distinct as well because the story sets Lagos up in comparison to other locations in the country whose landscapes have varying discrete characters. The narrator describes Kaduna as the same capital city laid out like a garden, describes the eastern village of Ogabu as green, being another world, so very different from Kaduna. And there's all these contrasts across the different locations that the main character moves through. So throughout Iska, yes, thank you. Throughout Iska, Africa is presented as a vast conglomeration of tribes, Nigeria being only a microcosm, with the tribe or ethnic group being the primary source of identity formation. So whenever the narrator speaks of Africa, one gets the sense that they mean the ethnic groups and nations within that geographical space, speaking for themselves and to each other, and not necessarily speaking to the world beyond and doing this work of interpreting and translating themselves for an extroverted kind of audience. So the titular wind, Philia, that's blowing across the nation allows the novel to explore the condition of spatial and ethnic diversity and a tumultuous unity in the national context. Her character as a protagonist also allows the novel to foreground that exploration. All right, no longer at ease. I was told I had 12 minutes because there are 5 papers, and I wrote this to be exactly 12 minutes. And I'm concluding. So no longer at ease does the work of tracing historical causalities into the present in a way that credits the foreign and global structures of domination for certain present local realities. So I'm just gonna read the last paragraph then because I'm being hurried off. But Ekwensi, with his dramatic plot twists and sentimental story arcs and indulgence of superstitions and popular beliefs, stereotypes, etc., appears to write for the story to fuel the demand of his local audience and supply literature that would satisfy in spite of what a global academic and economic institutions might see as commendable or subpar. While Ekwensi's text seems to say, here are these people that make for a good story, and here are these places in which things happen. Achebe's novel, in contrast, positions its space-making narrativization differently. Achebe's novel seems to say, here's this place, Lagos, which exemplifies a nation's link to the rest of the world, and here's how it has come into its present conditions and how it navigates its relationship with the world. Thank you. That's it.
Fidelis, do you have anyone?
Yes.
Fidelis. Fidelis, please, let's have you. Colonial connections, British ambassadors in the Lagos colony.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Fidelis, I can hear you.
Okay, okay.
All right, all right.
Okay, okay. So
10 minutes.
Okay, okay. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello, Fidelis. Go on.
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see I'm sharing my screen. Is it visible from your end?
Not yet visible, but go on, speak. We'll hear you, don't worry.
Okay.
Go on, just speak.
So, good afternoon once again. My name is Emerging Fidelis, and the title of my paper presentation is Colonial Connections, British Administrators in the Lagos Colony, 1861 to 1906. So the paper is divided into the following sections: the introduction, objective, literature review, methodology and sources, British governors in the Lagos colony, conclusion, and bibliography. My thesis is that nationality, training, and experience were key determinants of policy direction and governance in the Lagos colony. Lagos Colony was a British administered territory located within the Bight of Benin on the West African coast. It was annexed on 6 August 1861 and officially declared a British colony on 5th March 1862. The territory was merged with the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria in 1906. The primary objective of the study is to explore the intersection of national identity, professional training, and administrative experience with governance in the Lagos colony between 1861 and 1906. The study will also uncover the lived experiences of British governors in the colony and reassess the colonial legacies of British governors in the Lagos colony. So the following works helped me to set the study in the context of the history of the Lagos colony. I benefited a lot from Damilola Adebayo Adewumi's Electricity Agency and Class in Lagos colony, 1860s to 1940. Slavery and the Birth of an African City by Christine Mann was also important during the research. Livelihood in Colonial Lagos by Munsuru Mritala was equally important. Histories of Dirt, Media and Urban Life in Colonial and Post-Colonial Lagos by Stephanie Newell was also very, very useful. Infrastructure, Development and Urban Facilities in Lagos, 1861 to 2000 by Ayodeji Olukoju was also very, very invaluable. And also, lastly but not the least, Alfred Moloney and his strategies for economic development in Lagos colony and hinterland, 1886 to 1891. That particular work was done by Olufemi Omoshini, who is, may his soul rest in peace. I think he's late now. So for the methodology and sources, the study was based on archival research. I examined primary sources such as manuscripts, papers, letters, annual reports, meeting minutes, treaties, and so on. So the colonial history of Lagos is incomplete without mention of Benjamin Campbell and the Lagos Consulate, which laid the foundation for the Lagos colony and protectorate. Campbell was a Scotsman, a merchant, and pioneer British consul of Lagos Consulate. And before taking up the position of British consul for Lagos, Campbell had some 20 years prior professional and local experience. And he vigorously campaigned for the abolition of the slave trade and promoted trade in agricultural produce in Lagos. I'd like you to note here that Campbell was a Scotsman. He was from Scotland, and he was a merchant. So his policy revolved around promoting trade and encouraging commerce in the Lagos colony. So we move over to the next British governor of the Lagos colony, William McCoskrie. He was the pioneer acting governor of Lagos colony. He acted between 1861 to 1862. He was also a Scotsman, just like Campbell, and he was also a merchant. And he had about 7 years experience in the affairs of Africa, having represented the British firm W.P. Houghton in West Africa. And he opposed to, any perceived threat, threat to trade, including missionary activities, which he felt, interfered with trade. And something very subtle about McCoskrie was that he tended to be sympathetic to slave owners and did not appear to believe in the practical abolition of slavery in the Lagos colony. And
Journalist, you have 4 minutes more, so please speed up.
Okay. So Freeman was an Englishman and a trained anthropologist. He served as British Vice Consul at Jena in the Ottoman Empire. And part of his contributions to the colony of Lagos was that he expanded the frontiers of Lagos colony to Palma, Badagry, and Ekpe. He inaugurated a legislative council and enacted an ordinance that legitimized the efficacy of the laws of England in the colony. Glover was another British governor of the Lagos colony. He was a trained naval officer. He was notorious for disregarding, rules and orders from officials in the British colonial office, and he cultivated relationship with delegations of questionable characters, among which included Madame Tinubu, Oshodi Jakpa, Pusun, and of course the dethroned Oba Kosoko. Another important British governor of Lagos colony was Cornelius Alfred Mullany. He was equally an officer of Irish origin, and prior to his appointment, he had served as Secretary of the Gold Coast between 1873 and 1878, Secretary of Lagos Colony between 1878 and 1883, Administrator of the Gambia Settlement between 1881 and 1886. And Mullany concentrated his energies in promoting the economic value of agricultural produce in the colony. Denton, also served as an acting governor of Lagos between 1889 and 1890. He was a British army officer, and he promoted Mullany's ideas of developing Lagos trade and commerce through raw materials and cash crop produce. So Thomas Carter, he was without doubt the longest serving governor in the history of the Lagos colony. He presided over the affairs of the colony for over 6 years. He had about 7 years experience in the military, and also another 16 years experience in the colonial service between 1875 and 1891. His style of governance involved the use of British military might to intimidate local Yoruba kings and chiefs to sign treaties of cession. Macaulay was the first serving British officer in active service to be appointed governor of the Lagos colony, meaning that he did not retire his appointment as a military before being appointed. So he was holding both positions as a serving military officer and at the same time governor of the Lagos colony. Like other British governors in the Lagos colony, he had prior experiences in Malaysia and Singapore, and he actively participated in the local politics, in the Lagos colony.
All right, hello, Fidelis.
Yes, sir.
Just conclude. Just go to your conclusion.
Okay. So I'll just quickly go to the conclusion. So the study concludes that a comparative analysis of the nationality, professional training, and administrative experiences of British governors in the Lagos colony will open up new frontiers in Lagos studies. Between 1861 and 1906, 9 British governors were appointed to administer the Lagos colony, out of which 3 were acting governors and 6 were substantial governors. In terms of nationality, there were 6 Englishmen, 2 Scotsmen, and 1 Irish man. The British governors in the Lagos colony initiated policies and employed peculiar styles of governance that were shaped and influenced by their national leanings, career training, and years of experience in the colonial service. The Scottish and Irish governors were more persuasive in their approach to governance, preferring the instrument of diplomacy over the use of force. In addition to trade and commerce, their policies were directed towards improving healthcare delivery and services, and also to improve productivity. And the majority of the governors with military backgrounds were imposing in their approach to governance, preferring the use of force at the slightest opportunity. They were also notorious for flaunting orders of colonial office. And lastly, it is hoped that Scholars of African history and area studies will build on the foundation laid by this study to explore other aspects of the lived experiences of British colonial officials in the Lagos colony and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Fidelis. We'll get back to you shortly. Please just stay online. We'll get back to you shortly. Hello, Fidelis. Hello, Fidelis.
I'm with you.
All right.
Yes.
Please, just stay online. We'll get back to you shortly. We have 2 questions for you. All right. Before we take Fidelis off, let me quickly speak to what I have here. My own paper. All right. Now, as a presenter now, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Ogunli Olayan Jacob from Lagos State University. I have here to speak on question of language, urbanism issue. Question of language, urbanism issue, and identity formation in post-colonial Lagos. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the 21st century beginning has been characterized by an increased interest in the relationship between identity and language, tendency which explained by the realization that multiculturalism and multilingualism have become an integral component of experiences of most individuals in Lagos, especially in post-colonial. Historically, when Lagos was under the British colony, you could see how the British attempted to have at their cover all people of Lagos. At that point in time, the British colonial government had decided to take over the economic, political, social activities of people of Lagos within that time. To the extent that many of the policies that they put in place capture the people and make people that they have no choice than to subject themselves to the whims and caprices of the British colonial masters. Fast forwarding, as at the time we now got independence, we now see that people of Lagos now decided to have, of course, a new life, a new beginning, and a new turning of things, of events. Rapidly, we now see some of the changes that comes up onto Lagos. Because why? Population of Lagos grew excessively. Then as at time we now have population of Lagos growing excessively each passing day. The attention was now said to be paid on language and languages of people that now come to live in Lagos. Of course, a lot of work had been done. Like when Adedayo was presenting, he made mention of some of the people that came to live in Lagos and the population of people that will have in Lagos that snowball into perhaps violence and crimes, especially in some urban areas of Lagos. Now, as a result of this, the question of language now arose due to people that decided to come into Lagos in post-colonial era. And within that time frame also, we now have urbanization. That is, as a result of people coming to live in Lagos, day in, day out. But here I have briefly that there are some factors responsible for urbanization in post-colonial Lagos that speaks to the question of Lagos before moving to identity formation. Of course, these factors include economic, industrial growth, infrastructure development, population increase, urban migration, etc., which of course a lot of literature have been said concerning that. Then the main factor also was that urban development in Nigeria could be said to be rural pushed combined with urban pull. Then another factor could have been contributed significantly to the urban growth and expansion of Lagos, leading to urbanization, which, of course, as a result of urban growth, we now have urbanization. Then we also have industrialization, better employment opportunity in Lagos, because people that lived outside Lagos, rural areas, believe that on getting to Lagos, they're going to see better opportunity for them. Fast forward, please, next slide. Now also, in post-colonial urbanism, we now have that post-colonial theory, post-coloniality as historical, political status, etc., have spoken to urban theory. What made people to be coming to Lagos in post-colonial era? The colonial and anti-colonial political struggle was also a key factor that we mentioned under post-colonial urbanism. Then the quick question here is whether post-colonial urbanism serves more as a theory intervention in the way that urban theory is generated, etc. Now, moving away from all this, like Professor Olontobanju said in the morning, when we talk of identity, of all these people that were coming to Lagos, we could not see that they were trying to align themselves with some levels of identity, which of course we might say to be other personal, cultural, gender, professional, religious, social, etc. But now the question now being asked will not be that if we don't want to leave the question of linking the question of language, urbanism, and this identity formation, what now brought about essence of identity? Like Lana said, okay, people that comes into Lagos really wanted to deal with identity formation. We now talk about self-awareness. We now talk about preservation of their culture. So also, we wanted to see recognition. Also wanted to see some of them being empowered. Then wanted to see some social changes and transformation that comes onto them, apart from talking about their psychological well-being. So all this speaks to identity matter and to why essence of identity was of crucial importance in post-colonial Lagos. Now, this happened as a result of colonial and post-colonial cities because of what we have. In colonial era, we could see how the British were just trying to do one thing or the other to bring Lagos up. But in post-colonial cities now, we now see how governance was carried out and be carried out in order to bring Lagos out of the doldrum of the colonial masters, which of course speaks to a lot of people that comes into Lagos, bringing into identity formation. And that is where we cannot say that when we talk of essence of identity, people that really wanted to stay in Lagos wanted to be really identified. And there's no question about the identity. Why? Because from one locality or the other, in post-colonial Lagos, we could see them and we could identify them from one area to another. Next slide. Now, well, when we talk about sub-clearances, next slide, we are talking about how we have urban development in Lagos because there are some areas that needed to be cleared. In fact, in the area of colonial masters, that was what they did in clearing society areas in order to build up so many houses for people in Lagos. In fact, right from the time that they even opened up Catapult in 1931, linking island to mainland, and that was where we now have indices that Lagos will grow. So now we have here some slums and indiscipline, because as at the time that urban development fell short of what people expected that time, we could not see in what I put on my slide that living in unplanned areas rose after independence from 22% in 1952 to 50% in 1973. Also, we could not see that most carrier areas, of course, in Lagos, of course, like we've said, there were slums which needed to be cleared. And in all these areas, open up some places for people, actually clear them, and people live there, and they wanted to be identified. Also, in saying this, for many of the slums, such overcrowding was partially compensated for by better provision of maybe provision of toilet, electricity, pipe water, etc. All this one, I decided to put them to see how slums were as at that point in time, then how slums looked like in post-colonial and some of the disciplines that followed it. Next slide. Then, when I've mentioned this, when I came to realize that the question of language, urbanism issue, and identity formation remains a greater question for people that lived in Lagos in post-colonial era, because of the fact that in post-colonial era in Lagos, people trooped into Lagos from one area and the other, and they really wanted to form identity in which we can reckon with them, in which we can recognize them as Nigerian, as people that have come to live in Lagos. Thank you. But have 15 minutes. Please have any questions or television. We see after, sir.
Okay, very good. I want to congratulate all of you. all the and they did very well. But there are some things that are not clear. So probably you might email me or give me a phone later for clarity. So let me start from the last speaker. I want to commend your presentation. It was a wonderful one. So they said the leaders, they lead by examples. So you have done very well. But I was expecting to hear some things in your work. Because you said the question of language, urban issues, identity formation imposed. Yes, like there was a speaker that was talking about architectural designs in Nigeria, which I think she was talking about the study of Brazilian architecture, and she was so proud about that image. But I want to say that immediately after independence, because I did a little research in Lagos history, after independence, then we begin to have our own new structures. Like we have the Surulere quarters, we have the one in Morocco as well. So most of those buildings were erected after. So I want you to further your research on that so that it will justify the question of identity formation in your work. So thank you very much, sir. Moving forward, I want to ask Fidelis Meje. I don't know if he's hearing me. He was talking about that his research will be, he's going to use archival, he has used archival research, or I don't understand that. So the question is that, which of the archives did he conducted? And he should tell us specific challenges that he met while he was carrying out research at those archives. Then I want to ask a question for Comfort Azubu Koda. I think she's here. Maybe because of where we are coming from, I don't think I need some clarity in my work. I've been finding it difficult to know exactly the overarching aim of your work. But I know that this work has been existing for a while, which is your work, is original to you. So I give you kudos to that. But probably some of us, we are not from that linguistic department. So when you say Lagos, despite unlocking charismatic personality, I begin to look at it. Are you talking about the pictorial history of Lagos, and you are trying to unlock the space? Probably you are trying to make the identity. Maybe you want to change the narrative. I don't understand where the focus, the major focus of that. So in a simple, maybe just in 2 minutes, in a clarity terms, can you just tell us the aim of that work and the objective? Maybe just one aim and 2 objectives should be enough. One more person, vulnerability. Okay, there is somebody from the first presenter, the lady that we could not hear her. No, oh, sorry, the second presenter, the online presenter. Yes. The lady was, I think she's from Redeemer University. She was talking about the methodology that she used in her work. And I think there is a conflict in what she's saying. I don't understand. She was talking about historical methods and also talking about theoretical approaches. So as an historian, I know that most times when you are conducting your research and you are using historical method, I think it is fine that you stick to historical method. It's not like somebody who is saying that I'm going to carry out qualitative and quantitative. You are confusing us. And you might actually be confusing yourself. Okay, some of us are doing history, scientific studies. Then we now start talking about theory. We have justification for that. So please, I'm saying this to encourage you. Maybe you should try and understand historical method of approach and theoretical and also qualitative and quantitative, so that when you are presenting or you are in class to your students, you'll be able to have a clear cut of where you are going. Thank you.
Can I add to this? I'm a professor, professors. The dean of this faculty has supervised me some donkey years. So let me quickly add this. I'm Professor Timothy, the most published professor in the humanities in Africa. What I'm going to do now is to tell you, now, this historiology. Now, I went to LASU. I gave LASU Center for General Studies lecture. First, LASU, as if they were waiting for me. My reputation went ahead of me. What I did is to go down You see the first last lecture on cultural nationality, the 19th century. I had 19th century. Yes, I've written on cultural nationalism when the Vincent changed their name to Agbebi in the 19th century. It's historical. There I did not dwell on the methodology and the rest of them. I've done that in University of Paris, and I was scoring 18/20. Are you with me? So here, you can go home. I made it very clear. Every one of you should go down, pick that cultural nationalism in the 19th century. It's there. My students are there. Cultural nationalism in Lagos colony in the 19th century. You know. So please, you just add that you needed to collect them there. And those of you, oh, you have it already.
Yeah,
You have it already. You can see. It's focused. That's why you have it already. You have it also. You have it also. You are focused. You have it. Yes. So that's why you came here, Lagos Studies Association. And then let me add, by the destiny, I'm not from Lagos State, but in 1995, 1999, they made me chairman of all the books in Lagos State. So you are in trouble if you miss this opportunity. I'm not doing propaganda for you, but to make sure that your work is to the point, to be focused. The name, I've not given my name. My name is Samuel Jide Timothy Asobele, Professor of Professor, University of Lagos. Don't invite me. We have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I have a question to Antonia. I hope she's.
Antonia, are you with us?
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm Patricia Cosio. I'm from Polish Academy of Sciences, and I'm currently doing similar research. So I saw in the program that the topic on Brazilian. I was very pleased to.
Sorry, please excuse me. I can't hear you. Well,
Hello. Can you hear me now?
yes, I can.
Okay, I'll be holding this. So I'm currently also conducting my research on Afro-Brazilian community here, and I was very pleased to see the topic in the program. So it's a pity that we couldn't meet in person this time, but I probably use the opportunity to write you. I have the email in the book. So I have a question and also link to the question that you had, Professor. So about the methodology and what is your methodological approach towards such a broad theme, which is identity and architecture. It's like 2 different dimensions, I would say. And also, could you give some examples? We couldn't, hear it during your speech, and I will be happy to get more detailed information. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've taken note of that question.
Any other question for Antonia? Okay, please respond to that in just 1 minute. 60 seconds. Respond to that.
All right, so my partner and I, we actually have close proximity to Lagos, so we are basically employing interviews. So we are interacting with the residents of that community, the families, and yeah, basically trying to get as much information as we can from family members as well as residents of that community and other historians that have carried out research in that area. So our methodology basically tilts more towards primary sources because we are trying to explore what these buildings actually meant to the locals, to the owners, and to Lagos and Nigeria at large.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
Sorry, also please, for the comment by, I'm so sorry, I don't know his name, but I have taken note of that comment. That was an error on my part, and I would edit that. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonia. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I want to ask the last speaker, that's the moderator, about you talk about the question of language and urban issues. So I want to know what theory accounts for the language perspective of your work. What theory accounts for that? Like then, I also want to ask the lady that spoke about that used no longer at ease. That's comfort. I think I lost that when you were a presentation. Can you just tell us what is the main argument of your study? What's the main argument, please?
Okay, so well, like I said, this is an excerpt from a longer work. I should hold it. This is an excerpt from the longer work. The main argument, and I'm a literary scholar, so what I do is literary criticism. My aim and my objective is not to affect policy or anything, but the main argument of my work is really about attention, the way that we study or approach, attend to certain spaces. And I presented these two novels side by side to look at the ways that they depict Lagos differently and the ways that they pay attention to Lagos differently. One, attending to Lagos as a locus of an empire, imperial enterprise in West Africa, and one attending to Lagos as a space that that's embedded in a local spatial network, right? So that's the diptych part, where there are two images of Lagos and two different ways of attending to Lagos. It's really about attention and the creation around the narrative.
Well, thank you very much. Now, quickly, there's a comment online. Okay. What's the comment online? All right. Fidelis.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, Simon.
Okay, so the question was some of the challenges I encountered while carrying out this particular study. I did not mention in my preamble that this is a working paper, and everything I have presented so far are findings from my preliminary research. So I will start from the challenges. I think one of the challenges I've encountered so far has been in the area of finance, because it has not been really easy, and I've been hello. Hello.
Yes, we are with you.
Okay, so I've been working with people in the National Archive in Key, that's in the UK. I've been using their online resources, though I have to pay for some of the manuscripts that have been sent to me. And I'm also working with people at the National Archive here in Nigeria in Ibadan.
All right, is that all?
Yeah.
There's a comment online.
Another comment online? What's the comment online? There's another comment online.
Yeah, the person said also. So okay, to Fidelis. Okay, to Fidelis Emerging. Okay.
I think there's something.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sir. Okay, please, I'm just going to ask question from Fidelis. Fidelis, are you there? Fidelis?
I'm with you.
Okay, I want to thank you for your presentation. I really gained a lot concerning the British governors in Lagos colony between 1861 and 1906. Please, could you justify your period? Thank you.
Okay, about the period?
Yes, the significance.
Okay, yes, I did.
Yes, 1861 vis-a-vis 1906. Thank you.
Yes, I did mention that. I said that Lagos was annexed in 1861, and that it was merged with the Southern Protectorate in 1906. Hello?
Hello, I can hear you. Although summarize, again, just to justify what really happened between that period, what happened that 18
1861.
Yes, annotations. Okay. Okay, what of 1906?
1906, that was when the colony of Lagos was merged with the Southern Protectorate of Nigeria.
Okay. Lastly, you mentioned one textbook, Damilola Adewumi. So the situation whereby you wrote in your write-up, I saw Psycha. That one is Psycha. That is capital C dot 1860. But I just want to tell you that it should not be in capital C. Rather, it should be in small c dot 1860. Is that taken?
Okay, thank you very much for that observation. I will effect the corrections.
All right. Thank you, Gladys. Okay, lastly, before we let me quickly just answer that question. If you see what I said there, I said the paper focus on which people within the city of Lagos construct their identities in terms of ethnic languages or alternative language. Because in post-colonial Lagos, I told you, and that speaks to the question of urbanism. A lot of people that came into Lagos wanted to really be identified. So that question of language, that speaks to the ethnic language through the identity in which they wanted to really identify. By the time I selected some people, other focus group discussion, within Lagos Metropolis, they were able to tell me formally, not informally now, that a lot of them in post-colonial city really wanted to be identified. And that is why they said, let there be language in Lagos in some particular area. Like for instance, if you go to Awudi side in Lagos now, the kind of language they speak will not be that original language, that is original Yoruba language that we know. That if you are not within their locality, within their identity, you might not be able to understand that language. That speaks to the question of language and identity formation. Have I answered that question? Are you clear? All right. Thank you very much. This they have. Okay. 2 minutes more. It's still good to. It's still good to. We can't say that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Show the level of identity, these are these ethnic composition of the
See, I have everything here. So because of time, yeah, of course, I have everything here. Even the question Shekoni asked, I have it under slums and the discipline. This type of architectural, development, architectural houses, everything. I have everything here. But because of time, I was able to measure it. Anyway, the paper is work in progress. That we can see. Okay, so thank you very much for all the delegate participants, everyone that has secretary, all the presenters. We appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Antonia, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's forget about food. Let's forget about food.